What's going on, guys? Coach Gaglione. He has another edition of the Powerlifting with People podcast. I'm your host, Coach Gags, and we got Big Daddy Chapp on the line. What's going on, Aaron?
What's up, man? How you doing?
Good. So we recently kind of reconnected after a long time. I think it's been quite a few years since we got to probably see each other in person. I know that you've a lot has happened since then. I think kind of probably first rubbed elbows in Hellertown at a seminar I was kind of doing, and then we recently kind of competed together under some weird circumstances. Like I said, I had chopped off my finger. I was trying to do a equipped bench with like a multi-second pause. It was kind of wild, but uh, but I thought it was great to see you lift. It's great to see like someone like yourself that's been in the game for a long time. But if people that aren't familiar with who you are, like, what do you got going on right now, and just give us a little bit of information about yourself.
Oh man, that's a long list because I turned 42 next week or week after, sometime soon this month. I turned 42. So there's a long history there. It's a lot of years, man. I was a college water polo player, so that's kind of like where my fitness came from. And then obviously always lifted for that. And then it was after college I was teaching, phys ed teacher and health teacher. And then I kept playing my sports, kept playing water polo, intramural sports, but I always like train on the side for it. And then eventually I kept getting hurt playing sports. And because that's what happens. It's an open skill and you're moving constantly, the environment changes. And I was like, you know what, let me just give this lifting thing a shot, and I'm just gonna lift weights and see what happens. And then just started pursuing strength sports like bodybuilding, and then I found powerlifting. And then I realized bodybuilding was based off of people looking at you and making a claim. And if I powerlifted, I could lift 5 pounds more than someone and beat them, and no one could tell me I didn't. So I was like, I'm gonna go do powerlifting, and kind of fell in love with that as my sport. And anyway, started coaching too, and now I coach full time. I don't teach anymore. I'm a coach. I coach athletes. I coach lifestyle clients, mostly lifestyle these days, but still love my powerlifting people. And as far as my powerlifting goes, I did break the all-time world record for masters in the 220 weight class. Had that for a little bit till somebody came along and broke that, but I still had it. And once you get a record, it's like you're trying to climb that mountain, get up there. It's like, yes, records are meant to be broken though, but it was a nice accomplishment to have that for the time that I did. And you saw me after a long hiatus because I tore my bicep,
Mm.
tore it playing basketball
Oh,
because I
wow.
decided I was going to go back to playing sports. And the first night out, I went to like a church group and was playing basketball. First night there, reached out playing defense on somebody, snap bicep went. So I had to get that repaired last March. And then I wanted to come back and compete again after that. So you saw me in December last month, and that was just kind of me saying like, hey, I can still do this. I had to rehab that injury, come back. So that was a fun little like comeback meet for me.
Yeah.
And I still plan on competing again. I'm not gonna stop until my body says absolutely no more.
Yeah, a couple of things I want to highlight. I think I did one bodybuilding show, which was kind of a bucket list thing, just kind of being a big guy my whole life and just, kind of just carrying more body fat generally just throughout my life. But I kind of agree with you. I think that there's something sweet about just being more objective about your progress and like also who's winning. But it's kind of funny. We were talking a little bit off air about like some of the judging standards and stuff. So I feel like over the years, sometimes even powerlifting is getting be more and more subjective over the years. But that being said, when you compare it to other sports, or certainly something like bodybuilding, where you're really kind of judging someone's appearance at the end of the day, which is probably very subjective, especially at like the elite level when it's like everyone is shredded, everyone's big. It's kind of some of it maybe comes down to preference at the end of the day. Um, I definitely think there's something really nice about just kind of knowing, okay, I got 5 pounds better, or I improved my total, or whatever the case may be. Um, in terms of like when you're with yourself now that you're getting a little bit older, how do you, I guess, manage your own like how are you kind of measuring some progress with yourself since like because maybe like at this point it's not always like good to think about this as an athlete, but I'm sure as a coaching standpoint, like if you're coaching someone who's 40, 50, 60 years old, there's going to be a point where maybe some of your all-time PRs are behind you. It's just because Father Time is undefeated, right? So how do you kind of manage what's reasonable in terms of like your performance? How are you like, I know you kind of mentioned like for this meet, it was kind of just the goal was simply to perform well, get on the platform, which I think is great. So, if you were to maybe kind of give someone advice, maybe that's in a similar boat, even someone like myself, and I can kind of provide some of my own commentary. How do you kind of manage, I guess, how do you manage kind of staying motivated and also kind of being like, you don't want to kind of give yourself like an out or an excuse to like perform poorly or kind of get weaker, but also at the same time being like realistic with, maybe like you're not going to get 200 pounds stronger on your squat anymore, right? Or something like that. So like what is kind of a reasonable expectation for someone that's been kind of competing for so long and lifting for so long? I know it's like a big open-ended question, but what are some of your thoughts on
No,
that?
man, that's a great question. And, just like I think perspective is, listen, the reason that anybody got into this wasn't because, it wasn't like, oh, I want to compete and I want to hit all these PRs. Like, you found this sport and you're doing this because you literally love to train. And if you don't love to train, you're going to come in and out of the sport in a year or two. You're going to come in, compete, be like, okay, that was fun, I'm out. But the people that last a long time, you're doing it because you genuinely just love to train. So it's just keeping that love of training in the forefront. And another thing that I try to make sure that I'm doing now is I try to make sure my health is in check. Like, I think before it was like my blood pressure 155 over 90. I don't even care, dude. I'm just trying to push these numbers.
Yeah.
So now, like, I mean, that last meet that I just did was probably the healthiest prep that I have ever had. Like, my labs were in check, my blood pressure, my glucose was in check. Like, I felt great meet day. I mean, I've been to meets before I blacked out squatting,
Yeah.
right? And so it was kind of nice to have that measurement too. Like, I can still do this and be healthy. But as far as the PRs go, I mean, listen, I went into the garage yesterday and went to squat, and I was going to work up to like a single. I wanted like an RP8 single, maybe I was thinking like 585, 615 in that range. Dude, I got up to 515 and I was like, today ain't the day. And I was just like, I'm going to lower the weight. I'm going to hammer some reps out, and that's going to be that. But I think having that little perspective too, and just being realistic with yourself is so important. Like, you can still train. We're training because we love to train. It's a hobby for us. We're not just like, when you're a power lifter or a competitor, you're not just like into fitness. You genuinely like training is your hobby. So we have to try to do it as long as we can. And you just got to keep those expectations realistic. Like, what I do, okay, I unloaded the bar, I dropped the weight, and I just, like I said, I just went to high reps. Where I think maybe like 5, 10 years ago, I either would have forced it or let it ruin my whole day, that like the weight felt heavy that day. But I think just that maturity is like, okay, like, it's not there today. Maybe it'll be there next week. And if it's not, it's not. But I'm here for as long as I can be here because I just love lifting heavy. Heavy is a feeling. It's not necessarily the weight on the bar. And as long as we stay dedicated to that, we try to stay healthy while we're doing it. You can do that for a really long time.
Yeah, I think that it's really important that like you're kind of like at the end of the day, like you're kind of chasing a feeling in a way. Like so like if you there's a feeling you get when you like grind out a heavy deadlift. There's a feeling you get when you stand up with a heavy squat. So I kind of agree. And I think that like one of the things that I have kind of done over the years and I'm going to continue to do like so like from 2015, 2016 through 2020, I was kind of like on my weight loss journey. So I didn't really compare my numbers kind of going down. Like I was like, okay, well, mentally, like I'm going to establish these new PRs and new weight classes. I think that if you are getting into your 40s, 45, 50, I think there's also nothing wrong with like, okay, well, what's my PR in like the Masters? What's my PR in like the Masters too? And like you said, also just like kind of falling in love with the process and like, okay, well, what's the intent of the day? Um, if the intent of the day was like a single with, whatever, like 1 to 2 reps in the tank, and maybe was lower than your expectation, you still accomplished the intent of the day and you could still kind of view that as a win. I think that sometimes being able to be flexible with your expectations. I don't remember if I spoke about this with you or someone else, but one of the best like kind of quotes I ever heard from Joe DeFranco was, "Your program should be written in pencil, not pen." And I think that that is a really smart way to go about your training, especially as you get older. But even if you can learn that, like, again, the PR is going to like happen when it happens and not forcing it, I think is huge, a huge advice. And I think that's going to also allow you to have that more longevity. And if you have less injuries, if you're in the sport longer, more than likely you're going to be, more successful. So in terms of, I guess, like the nuts and bolts of like your training now, what is your kind of in terms of like a typical week of training. I know that like obviously things might be different if you're like training for a meet or not, but like a typical like week of training, like how many days are you in the gym, how long are you like training for? Just kind of curious, like what how has your training evolved over the years, and maybe has things like what major things have changed. We can kind of maybe just go into your training now, and then maybe we could talk about maybe some tweaks that you did when you were from when you were younger as well.
There's a lot of difference. So now, I mean, I'll train 3 to 4 days a week, and obviously, if I try to squat and deadlift on the same day because it takes the most to warm up for that. So that's going to be a longer session, probably like an hour and a half, just to like get those lifts in and get warmed up. Um, Primary bench day, 45 minutes to an hour, and then I'll hit like a back day, which will be 35 minutes to 50 minutes. Like it's quick. I'm just in there, just hitting it hard. And then like I'll do like if I have time, depending on where I'm at, I'll throw in that fourth day for like some shoulders and some like a secondary press kind of thing. And that one's like, another like 45 minutes or so. But my training right now is not very long, super efficient. Everything's about efficiency and it's effort over volume. So I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna hammer things out. Like my accessories, I'm crushing them. But I'm not trying to be in there doing like, there's no, I'm not gonna get a lot out of doing a ton of different exercises at a ton of volume. And I think what happens too is the older you get, and you've been doing this a long time. I mean, I've been training hard for over 20 years. And what I can do that I think like somebody who's maybe 5 years deep can't do is I can activate all my muscle. I can accomplish in one set what might take them 4 sets to do as far as like breaking down and fatigue management goes, like getting to that level because I just have that kind of neurological capacity with my muscles and my body. So it's just about being efficient with the time.
I
Prep looked a
definitely.
little bit different when I was prepping for that meet. The sessions got a little bit longer. Obviously because we're going heavier and things like that. And then I'm trying to find people for spotting and things like that. But yeah, typically right now I'm lifting 3 to 4 days a week. I try to ruck a lot. Like
Nice.
even during that prep that I just did, I was trail running the same week that I did my heaviest deadlift of prep, which is so I never would have done that before. But again, health is wealth, and I think that that's something that I've really adapted or adopted over the years.
Yeah, I do want to kind of follow up on a couple of specifics in terms of like the nuts and bolts of like your accessories and also like how you approach them. But I want to also highlight. I agree too. Like one of the best things I learned, and I kind of took from body. Well, I guess two things. One thing I kind of took from bodybuilding training from paying attention more to my step count, paying attention to doing some actual like cardio and aerobic work in terms of like recovery in between workouts, in between sets. Um, Kind of mentioned like potentially managing your blood pressure and things like that. There's so many like other benefits, and not to say you had to be like a professional like marathon runner or anything like that, but yeah, including some aerobic work in your training, it's like low hanging fruit. So I definitely want to kind of maybe get into that as well in terms of, but before we kind of, well, I want to kind of backtrack into like how you approach your accessories, but I guess while we're on the topic of cardio, what are some, I guess, common, I guess, maybe myths or misnomers when it comes to like aerobic training or just cardiovascular training in general for powerlifters, and what would you say is maybe low hanging fruit for someone that maybe hasn't included any in their training like in the past? Like where would you kind of have them start?
Yeah, so I think that one of the biggest mistakes that I made, and I think a lot of people make, is that they think cardio is going to kill their gains. And it's far from true. Cardio is just going to enhance your work capacity and enhance your recoverability. And then if you are in meet prep and then you dial back that cardio like 10 days out, even 7 days out, wow, you're going to get like a huge boost too for your peaking. And because your body's so used to like,
Right.
that constant little extra breakdown. So you get a little boost in your peak at the end too. But but being able to get that blood flow going and that cardio capacity, it's going to help your accessory work. You're going to be able to handle more load. You're going to be able to recover better from session to session. I'm really, really big on like kind of like, moderate intensity cardio, maybe in that 90 to 110 heart rate range. And you can do that through like, I do a lot of rucking and I encourage a lot of clients to do rucking or incline walking, just little things like that. It goes a long way. You don't have to go super hard, although that's good for you to go hard and, get that higher heart rate work in. But personally, I only do that like once a week, maybe. And the rest of the time, it's that lower intensity and it seems to work really well for me.
And when you do the higher intensity work, do you like, is it like, do you do that on like a bike? Do you do that different, like, or do you like still like, would that be still same, I guess, exercises for the moderate or low intensity work?
No, I mean you got to move a little faster, right? So I like a fan bike and just doing like short sprints to get your heart rate up. I think people overcomplicate it. They're like 10 seconds fast and then
Right.
45 seconds slow and just go get your heart rate up. You're gonna know when to stop. Yeah, you're gonna know. And then when you feel that heart rate coming back down, jack it up again, come back down. It's just people overcomplicate it. But something that I do, which I have not done through my entire powerlifting career, is I started running just because I want to be a more capable man as well. And I think like there's something to be said. You should be able to run a little bit. And there was a long time, like when I was pushing like 250 pounds, like force feeding Pop Tarts and baguettes, trying to get my weight up. Dude, I couldn't even walk upstairs. Like I
Yeah.
was like heaving walking upstairs. So I just want to make sure I'm capable as well.
This is just like a random thing, but I'd say maybe about, I don't know. I'd say on average every other year, kind of depending on like what I have on the docket in terms of competing, but like a little bit of like a litmus test for myself, and I'm kind of also putting this out in the universe, and maybe I'll give this a go. At Memorial Day time, I'll usually jump in like local CrossFit gym. I'll do Murph, and I'll just if I can kind of complete that, I'll complete and not like with a weight vest or anything, but if I could like complete that, I know like okay, I'm in pretty darn good cardiovascular shape, and I've done Murph at like 290. I've done Murph with a weight vest shredded at 198 pounds. Like that was like my like fittest, I would say, like during my bodybuilding prep. So I've kind of done it at a variety of body weights, but I think that like if you are like a weight 242 and up, if you could kind of bang out some pull-ups, if you could run a little bit, like that's, you're probably doing pretty good. And that was like one thing we were talking about, Larry Wheels has been, kind of putting some weight back on. And I think that like one of the things I mentioned to him is like if you're able to kind of maintain maybe some of your calisthenics, like your pull-ups, your dips, if you're kind of able to at least maintain like your kind of strength and like kind of capacity on those things and potentially add in some aerobic work, I think you're probably doing pretty good. Like when you start to kind of add size on, if you're a little younger, maybe if you're in like I know for myself, like my best absolute strength was probably like in my like 20 to 20, 25 to 28 was probably like my absolute strength peak. And I wish I kind of included some of this stuff in. Just I think that would have helped me perform better at meets because a lot of my best lifts were like left in the gym. A lot of my best, and I was never able to kind of put all the lifts together because by the time I got to deadlifts, I was kind of smoked. So it definitely makes a big difference. I definitely think that is something that's low hanging fruit and something I'm paying attention to a little bit more. Even just something like just check out your step count. That's just a really simple thing. We all have it's kind of your if you have your phone with you, it kind of keeps track of it. So it's something that you just kind of pay attention to your activity level, and I think that is definitely something that is really simple for people to do. And then the other thing I want to kind of dive a little bit deeper on is like the accessory work. So one of the things I think we talked about a little bit in person in terms of, and again, this is not necessarily good or bad. It's just understanding like there's different tools in the toolbox and there's different like phases of training, which might you kind of mentioned that your peaking phase, when you're getting ready for a specific competition, things are going to change. But I think one of the things that I've kind of noticed in terms of like the pendulum swinging as far as in the powerlifting space, super like high frequency, higher volume, higher frequencies, and almost only like barbell training seems to be very popular. It's starting to maybe the pendulum swinging a little bit back towards the middle, but I have seen programs where there's like no isolation work, there's no accessories, there's no kind of hypertrophy work in there. So in terms of like yourself, and then maybe in terms of like how you approach your accessory work, you kind of mentioned you don't do a ton of exercises, but you hit them very hard. So like, what are maybe some of your go-to exercises that are not variations of the competition lift? What do you feel are like the most important, maybe at least for yourself, or maybe if you're coaching people for strength? What are some like isolation work or kind of secondary exercises that you feel maybe are overlooked or just a really good bang for your buck if you're pressed for time?
Yeah, I think that's an area that often gets overcomplicated, and especially in like just general strength space. Like I think some people think they're like bodybuilders and that they have to like hit this specific small muscle in their back and like do these deep stretches and hit this specific angle.
Right.
It's like, dude, you just row and you pull. Okay, back is like the number one thing. Like you should be absolutely destroying your back. But it doesn't have to be complicated. You can do any type of row and pull, and that's it. And like I said, I just think people get way too complicated with it. Uh, but those to me are huge. And as far as your bench goes, like I have a pretty good bench. But I think that that's because I emphasize a lot with like shoulder strength. I come from a swimming background too, so that helps. But hitting your shoulders as well. But again, that's simple. It's an overhead press. Hit some lateral raises, some rear delt flies. Like keep it pretty simple. You can do lateral raises and rear delt flies in like a circuit. Keep it simple. Triceps, again, you can throw those in there too and just burn them out. And I think that's one too where people don't go hard enough. You see people all the time. They're just like doing the rope pull downs, having conversation, and you got to push there because that's like your bench lockout. And then as far as the legs go, pretty much, when I find I get the best when I can get to a gym and get on a machine to squat, right? Even a belt squat, a hack squat. I love a pendulum squat, but any type of variation like that, you can just absolutely get those legs destroyed. And that's going to cause your muscle to break down, grow, get stronger, all the things. Because you know as well as I do, a squat can only take you so far with building muscle because your technique is going to break down before the failure happens in your muscles every single time.
Yeah,
So getting on those machines is absolutely key to building your leg strength for a squat.
I think with the squat machines in particular, especially if you're like a more hip dominant or like back dominant squatter, it's so important because like everything we do in powerlifting is so like posterior chain dominant. And I don't know if you remember like in the early days of like T Nation and stuff like that, like a lot of the information that we got was from equipped lifters, which is great. But is like the quads were just like kind of like not talked about. And then like when kind of people started competing in raw, it's like we were getting a lot of it, and it's again for equipped lifting, like you're really sitting back into the suit, and then like what do the knee wraps do? What does the squats do? Like you're kind of getting this assistance out of the hole. So I think I agree. Like I think doing some sort of squat pattern where it kind of forces you to like use your quads. So like if you do a hack squat, you really can't like drive with anything else besides your quads out of the hole. You mentioned I love a pendulum squat as well. And I think that if you are using a belt squat, just kind of making sure that if you want to prioritize certain muscle groups, maybe you're adding wedges or going like more upright and deep, just kind of make sure you understand like what you're using the exercise for. And then in terms of like your execution, like in terms of like when you're doing outside of like the effort level, which I think is important, are you trying to like contract the muscle and then like let it stretch? Are you trying to like what is your, I guess, mindset? Like, are you just trying to hit PRs on some of these things? Like, what is your like approach versus when you're doing like a barbell competition lift, obviously there's like a skill component to it. You're kind of practicing a certain skill. Um, when you're doing like say like a rope press down or like a back movement, does your mental approach change? And if so, like what are you kind of focusing on when you're doing more of like a isolation type movement?
Well, okay, so I think about whenever we do any type of movement in powerlifting, like any squat, bench, deadlift, scapular control is so important. How many times we talk about scapular depression, pulling the shoulders down and locking your shoulders in place. I mean, squat, bench, even deadlift, we're trying to get the lats tight. So what I try to tell my powerlifting athletes to do, especially when we get like close to a meet, if we're out from a meet, get the deep stretch, whatever, work the full range of motion. But as we get near a meet, I want you to reinforce your positions. So I want people to hold their shoulder down. And when they do like a rowing movement, do not go full stretch. Don't let that arm go all the way out. Keep everything tight and train your position, right? Condition the position and get yourself very strong with controlling your shoulder, like keeping the lats packed. You want to be strong there. So even like a lat pull down, don't go full stretch. Hold that down and just condition that position and be strong there. Because I think that that gives you a huge carryover to your lifts.
Yes, I hope that our social media editor just clip the condition the position. I think that should be the clip for this podcast, hopefully. But no, I think that's great. And to your point, I think that like sometimes when we consume information online, we're kind of consuming from different sources. So one of the things I've kind of noticed, you kind of mentioned about like doing some very novel like, reach around, I forget what it's called, pull around or whatever, like kind of stretch based row or whatever. And then a lot of times, like right now, like kind of the lengthened partials, the stretch position, the full range of motion is kind of more popular in the bodybuilding space. But again, in terms of like as a power lifter, if you ask yourself, well, what do the lats do for the competition lifts? And like you said, you're kind of stabilizing position, you're holding position, right? So one of the things that I also advocate for is like, yeah, spend a little bit more time in the contracted position, spend a little bit more time like getting strong, like isometrically, because ultimately, like if I'm in a squat, it's not really necessarily how much you could pull down, but it's how much you can kind of like stabilize and hold, your torso in like a rigid position. In a bench press, if you're kind of retracting and depressing your shoulder blades, can I keep my sternum up? Can I kind of hold my torso position? Although some of the bench styles now, people like purposely collapse and kind of, move their torso. But depending on like your technique, you're going to be kind of holding your back most of the time in a rigid position. You're not going to be kind of moving your back so much. So I think that also kind of be okay with, like I said, emphasizing the contraction as well. And also that's going to allow you to connect to the muscle better. So when you get to your compound lift, you're actually able to like use your lats. Cause that's like another thing I kind of see people like, oh, you flex your lats or whatever. But if you've never like done a lat focus exercise and really kind of engage them, like how you expect to bring them into like a more complicated competition lift. So I think that is great advice, and understanding like what you're doing the movement for, I think is really important, as opposed to just kind of going through the motions. Like you said, just kind of talking with your buddy, just having more intent with what you're doing, I think is really great advice, like all around. So I don't know if there's anything else that you want to add, but I think that's great advice for people, whether they're want to be like a world record holder powerlifter or not. If you want to get bigger and stronger, just kind of understanding the differences in terms of like your execution.
Yeah, I think just to add on to that too, like I think every exercise you do is an opportunity to get better with your entire body position. I was just working with somebody recently and we were doing like a split squat overhead press to work on like stability, and his toes were like moving all over the place. I'm like, dude, plant your toes. Like
Yeah.
this is a great opportunity to work on your rooting. Like think about your hip stability while you're doing this. And everything you do can be global. Like even a tricep rope pull down,
Right.
brace, get your core tight, root in with your feet, like have like a nice solid base with your feet. Like, everything you do, you might as well maximize what you're getting out of it.
No, that's a great point. I think that if you're going to do something, you might as well like kind of do it. And one of the things I also learned, it was kind of a big thing when I did a lot of seminars with Chris Duffin over the years. Talk about bracing, rooting, all these things. These are like very important fundamental concepts for human movement, and especially like the competition lifts. But like there's always, you could always do more. You could always brace a little harder. You could always root into the ground a little bit better. So yeah, I think that's great advice. Where every time you do a set, it's an opportunity to kind of practice those skills. So I think that's great advice. So I wanted to so there's two things I would definitely want to kind of touch on, like maybe how you approach your lifestyle clients, and then maybe after that we can kind of talk about some of your powerlifting culture and things like that. So maybe while we're on the topic of training, and then we can kind of shift over towards powerlifting culture and meets and stuff like that. When you're kind of working with someone that's a little bit more, maybe like less focused on breaking all-time records, maybe they want to get better, but they're not maybe concerned with being like elite in sport. Maybe they want to get stronger, they want to add some muscle, they also want to stay healthy. Like, what are the biggest things? I know you kind of mentioned like some people like 3 days a week. That sounds like like nothing, right? So that's kind of like something that kind of came to mind. But what are some, like, I guess maybe things that you do in terms of tweaking the program, or kind of making things, you kind of mentioned efficiency a few times. So what are some things that we can kind of do if we're working, if you're a busy professional, you want to get stronger, you don't have 4 hours to spend in the gym like 4 or 5 times a week. What are some like easy things that people can do to help kind of make their workout and training more efficient?
First off, is a split that makes sense, right? Like you don't want to be going in there doing an SBD day if you're busy. That's just not going to work. So I mean, like just keeping things efficient is probably the best advice, like as far as that split goes. And then just understanding, like, okay, so for every person, like most of my clientele is like 35 and up. Okay, I think my oldest client right now is 72. Um, Dude, we have to make sure that we are hammering core work. Core work is going to happen no matter what. So I like to throw that in the beginning. And I'm really a huge fan of like the lock five for hips and for core work overall. Like I pretty much have everybody do that on their lower days because it's just going to hit your core. It's going to open your hips up. I think it's important. It takes a little bit of time, but you can't neglect that stuff, especially as you get older. So talk about bang for your buck. We need core. And then you're going to hit a compound lift. I mean, you need a compound. It doesn't have to be a barbell squat. I actually hate barbell squats for my lifestyle people unless like they have an ego problem or if it's all that they have access to. I'll be like, yo, does your gym have a safety squat bar? Okay, we're using that instead. Because, nobody wants to jam their shoulders up under a straight bar when you have a safety bar. But anyways, so we're going to do a compound movement machine or barbell, whatever. And then depending on their time, it might only be three accessories, maybe four. I might do two sets of it and just hit like two AMRAPs, but give them like a range, like a 12 to 20 rep range or something, because that's just going to maximize what you're getting out of the exercise. I hate it when it's like, hey, do 8 reps. Some people hit that eighth rep and they're like, oh, I did 8 and I'm done. Yeah. Uh, it's just not working hard enough. So giving a large range and like pushing to like the max effort you can do is a great way to be efficient with your time. Because people sometimes mistaken, they say don't train till failure. Okay, that's great when you're doing a compound lift. Yeah, don't train till failure on a back squat. That's stupid. You're gonna get hurt. But when it comes to like an isolation movement, you can go to failure. Absolutely. And you're gonna get a lot out of it.
Yeah, I wanna definitely talk about the lock five, but yeah, to your point about like the training to failure thing, it's like I think sometimes people get like, well, they'll hear a sound bite and then like, oh, you should, it's more efficient. You get just as better results training, 2 to 3 reps in reserve, right?
But
But
they don't know what 2 to 3 reps is in the tank
right.
is because
So
they've never gone to that point, right? Like if you've never gone there, you don't know what that is. And honestly, let's be real, 90% of the population train to failure because you don't even know what failure is. And when you think you're at failure, you're probably not.
yeah, I don't know if you heard. This is a whole other can of worms. I don't know if you watched this. It was like a kind of a viral interview. It was like Peter Attia, Mike Boyle, um, athlete Jeff Cavalier, and Gabrielle Lyon. And I don't know if like what your thoughts or feelings are on Mike Boyle. I think that he's a great strength and conditioning mind, but a lot of times the powerlifters hate him because he always says, you shouldn't barbell squat, you shouldn't, deadlifting is, anyways. But I think that he was kind of clarifying a couple of things. I think technical failure is also kind of like potentially a good stopping point. I think especially when it comes to the compound lifts. But yeah, to your point. Um, Most of the people are not going to like train hard enough, especially if it's like a tricep push down where it's going to be an issue. So I think, yeah, just learning to like know what your limit is. And then at some point, maybe like 3 to 5 years down the line, if you kind of get that far, that's where kind of like RP and RR can be a little bit more useful. But yeah, I think for most people, um, having like some sort of like intention, maybe it's a percentage based work, maybe it's you're prescribing load on the compound lifts, treating those more like a skill, staying a little bit more further away from failure, I think is a good idea. But yeah, if you're doing like a tricep push down, you shouldn't be like afraid of like accumulating too much fatigue or it's kind of like ridiculous if you even like say it out loud, but this is like the stuff that's out in like the ether that we have to kind of unpack a little bit where it's like, oh, you don't train to failure, just only do stop at 2 to 3 RIR. But these are like the things that some of our prospective clients are consuming, and then we have to kind of like take a step back and like, all right, well, in a vacuum, maybe that's true, but in the real world, this is like actually how things are done. But yeah, so I totally agree. We kind of preaching to the choir. I think it's kind of funny. And again, I think that like you need to like know where that limit is. You need to actually get to that limit to like know, kind of, how to adjust backwards from there. And I agree. And especially if you're pressed for time, if you're doing 2 sets, you got to make them count. And to your point, if you're a novice lifter, you're probably not going to like be able to create that kind of damage. But if, again, if you're someone like a Larry Wheels or someone like us who's been doing this a long time, if you're a 600-pound bencher, the amount of like stimulus and the kind of damage you can kind of create is a lot different than someone that maybe their max is like a 185, bench press or something like that. So absolute load certainly matters and neurological efficiency certainly matters. So I wanted to kind of circle back for the people that are not familiar because when people kind of say core work, it might, so like I know there's a lot of debate where sometimes for even for lifestyle clients, should you flex the spine? Are you doing more like kind of bracing and stability work? So can you just kind of walk us through like what the lock five is and then maybe because I think that like in terms of I think a lot of people that are new like don't know necessarily how to brace or kind of train their trunk for strength. So if you could kind of just walk us through like what those are and then maybe like how you execute them.
Oh man, dude, that's deep. So yeah, lock five. It's just working your hips, clamshells, kickbacks while you're laying down. It's hitting your glutes and basically the your backside because everybody gets kind of overworked in the front. Okay, not everyone. A general lifestyle person is going to be overworked in the front and their back needs work, especially their lower back. So the lock five, like those clamshells and those kickbacks are working the glutes and kind of like the lower end of the erectors, just like in the back there. And then we're going to do planking and we're going to do shoulder taps and side planking. So we're kind of hitting the entire trunk with that lock five. But that's, I think that's really important, especially like I said, for lifestyle, because they tend to be a normal average gym goer is like, I need to do ab work, and they're doing crunches and leg raises and all these things that are going to overdevelop the front, and then the back doesn't get developed, and then they have a weak back, and then they get back pain when they get older, and it's not because they're older, it's because they have weak backs. Um, I have found that power lifters, though, are kind of the opposite. So a power lifter has a
Much.
dominant posterior chain, and their erectors are like iron,
Yeah.
but they never do the front work. So sometimes a power lifter, I will take my power lifters and I'll be like, hey, you're going to do hanging knee raises and leg raises, and we're just going to work the front a little bit to get you some balance because they'll also have some back issues too if they're overdeveloped in the back and they don't have enough front. I dealt with that personally when I got really deep into powerlifting. I stopped doing ab work, not core work. I stopped doing ab work, and I started getting a lot of back problems. And then I started adding it back in, and things kind of took care of themselves as I got more balance there. But it just kind of depends on the person.
Yeah, I don't know if you've kind of so I, I'll kind of talk about Dave Tate and Matt Wenning. It's not exactly the same, but kind of similar concept where I know Dave Tate would talk about, kind of paying attention to like your arching versus bending exercises. So to your point, if we're always like in extension as a power lifter, if we're always arching, always, and I know there's different techniques, so maybe that's, at least back in the day, we were kind of taught to really arch our backs hard when we squat and deadlift and things like that. I think now we're kind of a little bit more in like a neutral position, rib cage down, all these things. But if we're always kind of in extension based exercises and we're never, like I said, the knee raises and stuff like that, kind of putting your spine into more flexion and kind of working more of the anterior chain, the abs, the hip flexors, and all these things. And then Matt Wenning would also talk about, and obviously he's a big advocate for his own belt squat invention, but having kind of traction versus compression based exercises. So thinking about like pull ups, hanging ab exercises, things like that. Obviously the belt squat where you're kind of tractioning downward, even things like dips and stuff like that to a degree. So like, and then exercises where you kind of put a bar on your back, or you kind of a bar is kind of compressing you downward. Just kind of balancing those things out, I think, can be like helpful and beneficial. Just like you wouldn't want to like overdevelop your pecs, kind of do some, rowing exercises to kind of balance things out. And not that things need to be kind of in perfect symmetry. I don't think that's reasonable, but just to kind of pay attention to like you said, are there some, are you kind of living in flexion some of the time if you're kind of arching a lot? Are you kind of getting some traction-based exercises to kind of balance all the compression? If you're an 800-pound squatter, and some people may not have these problems, like I said, depending on the exercise selection and stuff, but I think it's good if you start to have some nagging back pain. And one of the things I've been kind of messing with, I don't know if you've messed with it all, is just something like rope flow and different exercises to get my shoulder blades moving. Because I think a lot of times in powerlifting, we're always pinning down the scapula, pinning down the scapula. So like you mentioned doing like overhead work, and overhead work can be great to get the scapula moving because it's a little bit different when you're kind of on a bench press and you're kind of pinning everything down to the bench. So those are just some things that kind of come to mind. I don't know if there's any other things that you wanted to kind of add to that, but I do think that if you are someone that is older, maybe dealing with some pain, I think that we're having like a coach like yourself kind of look at your exercise selection, look at kind of maybe where there's some holes, and then maybe those things can also help kind of make you a little bit more kind of bulletproof in a sense, but also just make sure you're a little bit more well-rounded. So I don't know if there's any other things that you like kind of to do to kind of help balance your lifestyle clients out, maybe some things that they're like missing. Maybe, and we talked a lot about the lower back, anything for like the shoulder and maybe like neck region that you kind of find helpful for people that are like on a desk at a desk all day and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I love so funny. I just made a post yesterday about a prone Cuban press, right? Just laying down, getting the arms up and working all the small muscles in your back and your shoulders, like getting the upper back tight. I actually love a Kelso shrug for people that are hunched over a lot. Everybody wants to do shrugs like standing up, but a Kelso shrug is going to just be so much more global and hit like that upper back. Basically, what happens is when we're hunched forward all the time, like everything in the back is kind of stretched and loose. and we need to work on developing that musculature to get things tighter and kind of pull us back and have a better posture. I don't know, is it Spud that has the shoulder strap thing?
Yeah, so it's Donnie Thompson's bow tie.
Donnie Thompson's,
But,
yeah. I always wanted to try it because I'm like, oh, that could probably work while I'm sitting at my desk all day.
I think so. I've kind of gone through periods of time where I usually like to warm up with it, especially for like a competitive setting, and also you can have different. But yeah, I think it also provides a little compression on the shoulder and like kind of gets things like moving a little bit. But yeah, I think that's definitely something I recommend to people with some shoulder pain, and because I've had a lot of shoulder issues, and yeah, I think that these are just like really kind of basic things where if you're in a position for too long, like I said, like sit, if you're commuting, if you're a lot of people have desk jobs now, they're doing a lot of work on the computer, just also kind of working the reciprocal. I think pattern can be super helpful in making sure you're not like always kind of stuck in those positions. And I do think that like also too, like sometimes another thing, I don't know if, and then we can kind of move on to kind of more powerlifting culture stuff. I was talking about with some of the athletes over the weekend. It's very kind of like in vogue now to like just, well, you just need to like just warm up with the exercise you're doing and don't do like any of this other like kind of prep work. And I'm kind of a big advocate like against that, but that's kind of like the pervasive I guess information out there like now is just like, oh, you don't need to waste your time on these corrective exercises, these drills. So in terms of like your own experience and working with clients, like what do you find is like the value of including some like movement preparation? You kind of like mentioned like the lock five. You mentioned some of these other kind of I guess, whatever you want to, I call them movement preparation. I'm not sure if you call them warm up, whatever you call them, but like would you say is like the major like kind of value of kind of adding in some exercises like that before your compound lift.
I think just pre-lift exercises, I guess we'll call them. But I mean, listen, let's be real. The longer you do this, the more problems you're gonna have.
Yeah.
And I liken it to like I played water polo for a really long time. And I remember being like 30 years old and I'm getting ready to hop in the pool to play a game. And these like 21-year-olds get in the pool, they grab the ball, they just whip it as hard as they can. They're fine. I'm like, I can't do that. I'm gonna hurt myself if I do that. So when I look at like my younger clients, I'm just kind of trying to have them develop good habits. Hey, let's do this and develop good habits and strengthen you in areas also that are going to create more balance over time. Because, even like a little thing, like, okay, so I'm going back to the lock, but like a lock three, where you're doing all that little shoulder stuff, you're getting some stimulation in the back of the shoulders before you go to press. It's not a lot, but it's something, right? And if you just go and you lay down and you just start benching just right away for long enough, you're going to get that development. You're going to start hunching forward. Next thing you know, your shoulder's going to hurt. It might not happen right away, but it's something that you should be prepared for and you should develop the habits of doing some of these movements beforehand. I've seen all that stuff before. About like, you have to, oh, just hop under the bar and just do the movement with just the bar, go really light, do it, do a lot of reps, do tempo work, like all things like that. Yeah, that works until it doesn't work. That's, my advice on that. Like, yeah, that's great, maybe to start, but at some point that's not going to work. And I think everyone that says that probably hits a certain age and is like, okay, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah. Well, I think that sometimes success leaves clues. I think it's good to kind of like look at people who've been kind of doing it a long time. And yeah, I've always kind of found because I've been a big proponent of like some of that stuff. And part of that is like my strength and conditioning background is kind of like, dynamic warm up and all these things. It just kind of makes more sense if you look at things from like a sporting context. But then sometimes powerlifting gets weird because like the competition lifts is the training, is the sport, so it kind of gets a little bit muddied. But I think that if you look at like other sport training and kind of how they do things, I think there's a lot of notes, even just like I said, even just kind of general training, like we talked about. If you look at any kind of successful like kind of strength and conditioning program for like a sport, you don't just only practice the sport, like you do like other things, especially it's just any it's and I guess so, but powerlifting it gets apparently all you have to do is SBD and it has a different set of rules, but I digress. So I kind of wanted to get into powerlifting culture a bit and talk about, we kind of talked a little bit like off air about like kind of, some really fun times of, some of like the untested lifting kind of maybe like 8 to 10 years ago and how kind of the tides have changed. So I know that recently you signed up for like an ABS meet. So I'm just kind of curious, maybe like your thoughts on, I guess the state of powerlifting culture, what and maybe like what you think could be better, or like in terms of like moving the sport forward, I guess, in terms of like because I do think that like we're in this weird kind of stage right now. At least it feels like kind of it feels like more fractured than ever. It feels like a lot of like federations are kind of coming and going, and new federations are popping up. So I'm just kind of curious, like what you think, like the state of I guess the sport is right now, and then maybe some ideas in terms of like what you think that we could maybe do collectively as a group to improve. And I know it's like a big overarching question, but I'm just curious, like your general thoughts to get started.
Yeah, it's big. So honestly, there's a lot, and I think part of okay, so this is like a deep question, right? I think there's a lot of hands in the pot. I think that's a huge part of it. So you're looking for people to sponsor these meets and shell out money. And there's just so many different opportunities. It can't all be brought into one space. So I think that's probably like the main thing is just the disorganization, and it's just nonstop. Like even the weekend that ABS meet, that's the same weekend as like USPA Super Nationals. I think there's something else pretty big going on that weekend. Like it's just too much going on right now. So, where are lifters going to go? Oh, they're going to disperse all over the place. And then it's like, okay, there's like a big pro meet here, and then 6 weeks later there's another one, and 6 weeks later there's another one, and it's
Yeah.
just too much. It's almost like you almost need to have some unity there and have like a season. Because back when they had the Kern, the U.S. Open, we talked a little bit about that. I was nowhere near competitive enough to be there. But dude, that was like a once a year thing, and that was big money, right? Like Brandon Allen always talks about, he dropped that deadlift and it cost him like so much money
We were,
because
we
that
were
was
talking
like
about
that
that.
was it. Like it was there. Like everybody was coming for that prize. It was super competitive. It was also before the John Hack comes and takes everything era as well. But even then, like that was big money for like second place too, and fighting for that meant a lot. So I think to me, I know everybody has a lot of different opinions on this. I just think it's like too many hands in the pot, and there's just like too much going on. And I think it has to do with the rise in popularity of the sport in conjunction with social media exposure being more so than ever. I think it has to do with both of those because there's no denying the sport has grown, um, which is great, but it's just getting more people that want to have a hand in the pot. And yeah, I think it just creates it. I think it creates a disjointed system when there's just so much.
Yeah, well, to your point, I've even seen this with powerlifting gyms because you could see it even. I'd say West Side. You could look at like West Side, and you can kind of go from there. Um, with a lot of the equipped lifting era, like we would gladly kind of drive a few hours sometimes for a training session to train with crews or whatever the case may be. Now I feel like, and this isn't the case in every single state, but it's like if you don't like kind of jive with your gym, there's probably another gym that's pretty well equipped. Even like some of these commercial gyms, they have platforms, they have some are even getting calibrated plates, some are even, so it's like if you kind of, I guess my point is that when you have all these options, you're not really like kind of loyal to anyone, and for better or for worse. And not that like you want to have a monopoly, because like I said, you look at what's going on with the IPF, and like the fact that the USAPL kind of broke off, like it got so bad. But yeah, I think that having some sort of it'd be great if like all these federation presidents could like get on a meeting like twice a year or something and just like kind of hey, like we're planning, because even just like you said, just like not putting your big events like all clustered together, I think would be great to have say like, hey, we're gonna who's going to do the big meet in the summer, who's going to whatever the case may be. But yeah, I think with the US Open in particular, like that was like the meet, and I think that because that was the meet, and that was like you didn't have like a Pioneer meet, a Ghost Clash, American Pro. Like there's so many like options now. You have ABS coming to America. The Arnold was very big for a long time. um, and there's like some other kind of like offshoots of the Arnold, like the WPPL is coming back and stuff like that. And but yeah, I think that there's when you have so many options, it definitely kind of you kind of it kind of things get like overly saturated, and then like people kind of disperse, like you said, to like all these different kind of meets. You don't really kind of get the best of the best, and I think that's probably the biggest issue that we have in terms of like untested powerlifting. There's no like kind of true like world championship. There's no true like kind of Super Bowl, if you will. Um, But yeah, so it's tough to, again, it's one of those things where I know like one of the things I've been trying to do is I've been kind of getting people on this podcast from different federations, different walks of life, and just try to like kind of hear like their thoughts on things. And it's one of those things like I don't know if we're too far gone, or if there's like kind of a way like kind of back to some sort of normalcy. Even before the Kern Raw Unity was like kind of the meat. I don't know if you remember Raw
Hmm.
Unity, but that was like
I
where
do.
the whole idea of Raw Unity was like that everyone from like every federation would come. Like that was kind of like the point of calling it like Raw Unity. And that was like a really fun time. And then we had Boss of Bosses and eventually the Kern, and that was kind of, at least in my mind, kind of the progression of things. And we had some like one-off meets like Reebok and Slingshot Record Breakers, but they were kind of like spaced out enough where you can kind of do multiple of these meets and be like, okay. And I think that's kind of where, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think there's just maybe just too many cooks in the kitchen, and it's like if someone doesn't get along, it's like I'm just going to make my own federation, and and I don't know if like another federation is really the answer at this point. It's kind of like I don't know. So I guess like in terms of like what you personally would like to see in terms of like I guess unifying things a little bit more. Like I don't know if there's outside of people kind of talking with each other and communicating. Like, do you think there's any other I guess kind of way like forward for kind of the untested side of the sport?
Yeah, I mean, I'll stick to the untested side of the sport. It's just like kind of fading out anyway because you go to like meets where now it's tested and untested in the same meet because people are like, "Yo, we just need numbers, we just need bodies."
With people.
Uh, there's like barely any untested left, and it's fine. I mean, it just is what it is. You see what people are doing that are tested; it's unbelievable. With just like nutrition and training science and everything like that, and the genetic pool increasing. Let's not forget that.
Yep.
But as far as the untested thing goes, I mean, the reality is it's going to be whoever can put up the most money. And it sucks to say that. And it's not going to be, oh, we're only going to pay the top three based on dots. It needs to be something where it's like, hey, if you break a world record, you get this. And I'm not talking like $100. Like it needs to be significant. Like make it worth the trip wherever you're sending these people. And then you almost have to maybe simplify weight classes and then say, whoever top three in each weight class. And I don't know if they do that by dots or if they do that by because the weights might be drastic within the weight
Sure.
classes, or if they do it by total within the weight class. But you can't just say I'm going to pay out the top three based on dots because then it's just like the other people are just going to participate and fill the numbers. And that's like great and all. Like I've done meets like that. Like I did the showdown, I did American Pro. And let me tell you, they were amazing experiences, but I'm just filling the spots. And it would be cool if they were like, hey, we're going to pay out the top three in the 220, the top three in the 198, the 242, or that's a lot of stuff, but maybe they simplify the weight classes for the meet. I'm not really sure what that looks like, but at the end of the day, it's going to be where the most money is. That's where you're going to get the most people.
So one of the things I did like, I think that we could kind of take some notes. I think from something like Sheffield, or most recently we saw, I want to say maybe SBD Austin was the meet that they did this. So, and we talked about our friend, Brendan Todd, and they do this actually with street lifting as well. So instead of like having a formula, like Dots, Wilks, Swartz, Malone, whatever, you could do it by percentage of world record broken.
Yes.
So I think that makes it very objective, and it doesn't really kind of. There might be some weaker weight classes in a sense, but it's still like, okay, if it's a weaker weight class, and that's your incentive to like, if you want to cut the weight or whatever. And I think so. Like, if you had hypothetically, if the world record was like 1,000 kilo total, just for like easy math, and someone did whatever like 1,100 or whatever, if it's like a 10% like increase, then that would be kind of like your score for the day. And if someone like fell short, maybe they were like 900 or whatever. So maybe like if even if they don't break it, you could still like, okay, well, this person like kind of had the best performance based off like the current world record. And I think that something like that can be good because it doesn't necessarily because every formula is going to have like a little bit of a bias toward a certain like weight grouping. Like Wilks kind of favors the
Yeah.
heavy lifters and like the really light guys. I think some of the more modern formulas kind of favor more of like the middle weights. So there's always going to be kind of some issues there. And even someone like this would also kind of, no offense to John, we love you, but like kind of the John Hack effect where it's like, okay, if someone like a John Hack or a Colton just shows up, it's like, okay, well, now if John Hack or Colton shows up, they have to beat their own, they have to PR. they can't just, so I think that kind of makes things a little bit more interesting. So they can't just cruise and go 9 for 9 and kind of sandbag it. Not that like we necessarily would, but like they can, like John Hack couldn't go 3 for 9 and win that meet, right? So I think that makes it a little bit more interesting because now like the big dogs also got to like they have to have their best performance to beat someone else. If maybe like someone like a Christy Hawkins or someone, maybe some of the females, and then maybe male and female would be differentiated. But you get what I'm saying. Like someone else, maybe I don't know, like someone like maybe an Andrew House or someone comes along and kind of because I think he recently just kind of broke the 308 record. So like something like that. And someone like that can maybe come out of seemingly nowhere and then kind of beat a John Hack or beat a Colton because they upped their perspective world record by a larger margin. So I think that's something that I think would be interesting because the reason I've been kind of thinking about this is because right now I've been kind of doing more strict curl competitions. And for like a single lift event where strict curl also tends to like after like the 198 weight class, at least for men, like your body weight is not like the bigger you are, it doesn't necessarily give you like an advantage in like the strict curl anymore. So doing something like a formula, it doesn't like kind of like make sense. I haven't figured out like a way to do it, but if we said, okay, these are the world records in each weight class, this person broke it by the biggest percentage, and maybe they get rewarded for best lifter or something like that. So that's just something I've kind of been messing around with. So I kind of like that Sheffield format in a way, and also encourages like the top guys to like really kind of perform at their highest level and not just kind of cruise through the meet. So I don't know like your thoughts on that, or maybe if you think
Yeah, I
that.
mean it changes attempt selection as well because you're way more calculated with your attempts trying to knock that. And then if you're going toe to toe with someone, it also changes how they do it. And I really like that idea, but I think one thing that the Sheffield does too, besides having the monopoly on the IPF and everything like that, because that's also huge. Let's not forget that. But they, everything's announced ahead of time. I can't tell you how many like big meets they're like, we're gonna have a prize of
Yeah.
whatever, but it's
Yeah.
but they're not telling exactly what's happening. And I get it. You want to announce the meet far in advance, and you might not have all your funds secured. You don't know how much you're getting and this and that from the from entries and everything. But to have everything announced ahead of time, I mean, you want to deliver and you want people to sign up. You come out with that prize pool ahead of time, like this is exactly what we're doing. I think that's going to be a little bit different too.
Yeah, I think having that's something I talked about with Jordan Wong is like one of the things we talked about like for running a great meet is like just very clear and consistent communication with your lifters. As opposed to like you sign up and then you kind of like don't hear from them, for a long time, especially at like a high level meet. Yeah, set the expectation. Yeah, what's the prize money going to be? How's this going to be? Like everything from the equipment being used to like how the awards are going to be. So I think that's great. I think that's some good things, and there's just some ideas I think that could make things a little bit more exciting, and also like just have a little bit more uniformity to the sport. I
Oh
do have
yeah.
another kind of call I have to get to, and this has been great. So I want to well, what I like to close out with, if you have someone that's just starting with powerlifting, like what's one piece of advice that you'd want them to know?
Get a coach and get on the platform. Stop waiting until you're strong enough. I get that all the time. You're
Yeah.
like, well, I'm just not ready yet. It's like, you don't even know what ready is. Like, just get out there, set the bar, and now you know what to do in order to get better. And the other thing is, like, when I go out on the platform, I've competed on the same platform as like John Hack and Kevin Og. I've been there. I'm not comparing myself to them either. Like, I'm not like, oh, I can't beat them. Like, this is going to be the worst day ever. I'm looking at like, okay, who's within my target range? Okay. So I think a lot of people they get lost in it's okay to chase greatness, but take your steps to get there, right? So when you're looking at like a ranking list or something, like who can I knock off that's like 2 steps ahead of me? Think about that first and then work your way up. And the other thing is when you're first starting, just get out there and do it because you don't even know your baseline. How many people do we see? I mean, even that meet we were just at, they're like failing their squats because they're not hitting depth. They're failing their bench because they didn't train their pauses long enough. You don't even know where you're at. In training, you think you're something, but when you hit the platform, you might not be it. So just get out there and do it.
Yeah, no, it's well said. I don't really have anything to add. I echo everything that Aaron said. I think that just get on the platform, get a total, and then like kind of go from there and just kind of keep making improvements. And then, that will kind of take you very far. Just like kind of, hey, can I do, even if it's 2.5 kilograms or 5 pounds more, like each, a little bit, little PR each meet, 15, 5 to 15 pounds. If you could like add 5 pounds to your lifts, add 15 pounds to your total, like a few times a year for many years, that adds up quite a bit, and like you'd be surprised, like with how many hundreds and hundreds of pounds, um, And I know it sounds exciting to say like, oh, slow and steady and all this stuff, but it really is. It kind of is like an old adage for a reason, and it does like make a difference as you kind of climb the ranks. So I do really appreciate the time. This has been great, and like I said, hopefully, if people like want to get a hold of you, maybe they're interested in coaching, where can people find you and follow what you're doing?
Instagram, Big Daddy Chap. That's pretty much my main social. I also got X that I'm not too active on, and TikTok, which is kind of weird. I just started that one too, but it's all Big Daddy Chap. It's all the same thing. Big underscore daddy underscore chap. If you're wondering why, it's because when my wife told me she was pregnant and I was like, I'm going to be a dad, I changed my Instagram handle to Big Daddy Chap.
Big Daddy Chap, give him a follow. I appreciate you coming on today. If you guys enjoyed the podcast, please give it a 5-star review. Helps other people find us. And until next time, stay strong, and we'll see you soon.